Trainz uses squares to map terrain. The squares are 720 meters on a side. Well, we're going to add another square here, so 720 meters times 2 comes to close to a mile. We're going to add a little bit of a lake in here and do that by depressing terrain. We've got a terrain elevation tool selected here, then we set it to -3 meters or something, or 2 meters. -2 meters. So we got that done. So let's add a hill. We'll increase the size of the tool. See how the circle's bigger, and set it to raise up mode. And we just sort of drag it along, and it sort of pulls the terrain higher. Let's do some on the other side of the squares, and we'll set up a little bit of a valley here, and we'll run some track through the center of the valley. It's pretty hard to get hills exactly where you want them just with the up tool, so there's a plateau tool that you can use to smooth things off, and we'll switch to that mode here. Now we're going to be trying to smooth things a bit. Don't want to have hills that are too abrupt coming up from the valley floor. So the hills are in place, and what should we do now? Oh, let's add some water to the lake. So we need to adjust the elevation of that water. I'll bring it down so it's not overflowing its banks, and then we'll go fill the rest of the lake in. There's an island in the middle of the lake. I think those always look a little cool. Maybe I'm just thinking of Huck Finn Island at Disneyland. Now let's put some grass in now. This grid pattern just doesn't look so good. So we set the biggest square and we just start painting. We're going to paint pretty much everything with this. We'll come back and paint other textures on top of it to set up the details. One of the things to keep in mind is that you can hold down a bracket key, and that will automatically rotate the texture pattern you're using so that the repeat patterns aren't quite so obvious. Okay, we're almost done with that. Okay, let's select another color here. Oh no, let's do some track instead. Track is spline, so you just start drawing and lay down a bunch of endpoints for track segments, and then the program curves in between them. Now, if you don't want a curve, there's a tool you can use to straighten a piece of track. And once we straighten it, we may need to go back and adjust the curves going into it so they're not too abrupt. I think we should add a spur track here. Let's put an industry on this just for some fun. So I've got the spur coming out, and then there's a piece of straight, then there's a curve, and then there's the actual track that'll go to the industry, which should also be straight. And doing that takes some adjusting here, but you can see how I adjusted in the turnout. The closure rails that take on a nice curve. So let's try to set up the track to be parallel to the main line. So we use the endpoint circles and move them over to the same distance away from the main line track. This didn't come with frogs on it. If we're using procedural rail, those would automatically generate frogs. Also, it's got a really bad-looking switch stand. So let's replace that with a switch stand with a target on it. And so we need to put some sub-road bed underneath this. It doesn't look quite right. I'm just going to go for the muddy look here. This is what's called a PBR texture, which means that it's 3D. If you get down close to it, there's actually height information encoded into the texture, and the program, when it's rendering this, knows how to interpret that, and there's a certain amount of 3D you can get with it. Obviously, you can't have, something comes up high with, and leaves the ground because there's no way to encode that. So we're going to do a little bit of track adjustment here, get it to go all the way to the ends. I think we ought to get rid of the grid in the bottom of the lake. Let's put some nice watercolor in there. And we don't need to be too neat because we're going to be going over the banks with another texture later. You can see how the watercolor changes when you've got the bottom colored. So this is a texture I love to use. It's moss and rocks and mud. And it just sort of looks really good as the shore of a lake someplace, or an ocean, or who knows what, How about a farm? Maybe a farm would be good. So farms have fields, so let's plot this down and take a look at it. And if you look, you can see there's a scale knob, and we can set the scale, and that changes the size of the features. You just saw this is another 3D texture there. When you're down close to it, you could see the rows of crops in the field project upward out of the ground. There's actually ditches for the in between each row of crops. That's a good example of a PBR texture. A PBR is procedural based rendering or something. Anyway, that's the code word for a 3D texture. Obviously, if we're going to have track in an industry, we need to have a road that goes by, and farmers want to have roads to be able to drive their trucks to market or wherever it is they drive their trucks. Screwed up that, so needed to come back and realign things so they come out straight. Yeah, tweak that curve, and we've got to set this grade crossing up a little better. It's kind of funky. Okay, use the straighten tool. The straighten tool works on roads as well as on the track. And we're going to put what's called a traffic stopper in where the grade crossing, and that goes in, and we're going to connect the road up to the ends of it. And when cars come driving down the road, they see the traffic stopper, and if the traffic stopper is part of a grade crossing configuration, then it will actually cause the cars to stop when there's a train coming. We'll be putting the rest of the grade crossing stuff in later. The highway's a little high up, so we're going to adjust the height of the road here and just go around and tweak it. When you make a road, it follows the contours of the ground, and but it always is a little high up. I'm not sure why it does that. It's kind of a pain, really. So we set up a couple of intermediate points there, and then we're adjusting those to get the road to sit down snug on the ground, because most roads don't have a giant crack underneath them. Okay, so we got a farm. We gotta have a barn for the farm, so we dig around in the couple 100,000, actually several 100,000 assets that come with the program. There's the barn, and let's put a tractor, and actually two tractors. One of them's actually at work, the other's just sitting there, and maybe a warehouse would be good for that spur track. So that one, we'll just sit him over there. And I noticed that the track here isn't quite right, so we need to tweak it. And one of the peculiar things about the texture stuff here is that if you don't have the texture on both sides of a spline, like a road or track is a spline, then you wind up with all these artifacts where the texture, doesn't quite cover the road. It's really kind of funny, but you just need to go back over it and work with it, and that'll fix it up. And we're going to put more dirt down because we moved the track. Farmhouse. The farm means a farmhouse, so let's see. A nice blue one, huh? And the hills are nice and green, but really they ought to have some trees on them. If this is Oregon, there ought to be a plethora of trees around. So the easiest way to do that is you make a little a little tiny block of trees there, and then you copy it, and then you cut and paste. If you're holding down the bracket key, then it rotates the block that you're going to be pasting, uh, and so it helps hide the pattern. I've got this configured so that it's overwriting what's already there in the way of trees and objects. And let's see, we got the trees, maybe some rock outcroppings here. So I picked another PBR texture, 3D texture. It's called Cliffs number 3, I think. And it's another one that looks pretty good. You got up close to it and you can see how rumply it is. It's not just flat. Now the grass we originally painted on the hills was just a flat texture. So if we get up close to that, it's gonna, not look very interesting. All right, finishing up with the trees, and let's add some more grass textures here. Just having monochrome grass is really kind of boring, so we're going to go for a PBR texture this time. And just sort of dance that around all over the place. And it's just a simple thing, but just using multiple textures can really make a difference. Let's stick another texture in. This one's a little darker. And again, it's just sort of dancing it around. It's sort of like Bob Ross dancing around his paintbrush when he does his magic method of oil painting stuff. And how about one more grass texture? I mean, you seldom see something that's completely monochrome, so using all these textures kind of helps get rid of that monochrome effect. And this is another 3D texture, PBR texture. So when I'm building these, when I'm building a route in Trainz, I tend to just go over and over and over and over it, adding textures and then going back and putting more textures on top of them. And then, let's see, how about that narrow strip of trees there at the end to hide the fact that after the field there's the end of the universe. And some there, and just add some more. It's really hard to have too many trees, but actually it is possible. If you get too much stuff on here, it affects rendering speed. So another thing you can do with splines is there are shrubberies and undergrowth and things like that. So we're drawing in a bunch of spline shrubbery things here. Maybe with a little two-tier effect to a little path through the middle and a two-tier effect. Now we switch to spline weeds, or spline grass. And it's kind of a seedy grass, and we're just going to add those in and more. One row of this by itself doesn't necessarily look particularly great, but if you overlap them, especially overlapping them at different angles, then it picks right up and looks better. So when I'm building a route, I usually spend a fair amount of time putting these spline weeds in place. Later on, when we drive the route, you'll be able to see the effect that the weeds give in the shrubbery. It really is remarkably realistic, I think. Oops, if you try to draw a spline starting at the end point of a previous one or in the middle of it, then the program objects and say, hey, you can't do that. So yeah, I forgot to put the shore on the island, so I went back and did that. And we could use some taller trees. I don't think I had any really tall. There's one. So we'll just sort of click those in here and there. Don't do too many of them. Normally I don't like planting trees like this, but if you're just doing one kind of tree, it goes pretty quick. Let's do a little bit of road edge cleanup here. Clean that up. And too many conifers. Let's add some Let's get rid of the conifer monotony with some oak trees, and maybe use a car or two. Let's pick up truck. For some reason, when you put the trucks down, sometimes they're up in the air, sometimes they're sunk in the ground. So, like that one was sunk, so you need to go around and adjust the height. Maybe a trailer. I think I like it better on the other end. And what else can we put in here that add a little bit of interest? That's not really the right kind of cab for this. Let's just skip the cab on this one. Let's leave the trailer parked there and stick a tank truck here. Okay. And that needs to be lowered a little bit. Okay, that's in contact. Oh, forgot the wheel stops at the end of that spur track, so I'll put those in. And now let's get back and finish the grade crossing. So we need to put some crossing guard and lights up there. Okay. And then, yeah, this road is a mess, so let's try to fix that up. Paint it out, paint some dirt on it. I don't want to do dirt the whole way, so let's see if I can manage to feather it out. Okay, that's good. Train detectors. So these things right here sit between the rails. They're actually part of the track, and they detect when a train's coming. And those will feed signals to the traffic stop and to the crossing gate. So we're going to name everything the same basic name, which is crossing. And we say there's an ampersand 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And the program will automatically match up everything with the same crossing name and automate it. I love putting some boulders in, so we'll put those in, and we're going to adjust the height on them because just the way they come sitting, when you install them looks kind of funny. So then we take them and roll them around a little bit so they don't all look the same. And I forgot the weed splines here, so let's add some grassy detail. Yeah. One of the big problems here is figuring out what all the objects are. There's so many of them, so after a while you develop a few that you just use regularly. I watched a lot of how-to videos on Trainz, especially from a guy Approach Medium, and so I'd look at which assets he were using, and the ones I liked I wrote down and I started using myself. Let's save what we've got and switch into driver mode. Okay, so in driver mode now, instead of laying track and stuff, we're going to build ourselves a little train here. And let's see, we've got the engine, the caboose, maybe a couple of covered hoppers, and how about some Bear Creek boxcars? That was too many. And let's get some other boxcars, not Bear Creek. There's a Frisco and Oregon Short Line, and cook up everything together. Then we click on the locomotive, and once we've done that, we're set to drive it, really. Well, we got to get out of the train builder first. So leave train edit and click on it, and then, okay, here we are with our cab view. What's in the cab? We can look all over the place. The gauges all work in this cab. You can look behind you if you want. Actually, we could even climb back there and walk outside the cab if we wanted to. So I think things are looking fairly good here. Let's, there's another thing you can do. There's a way you can set the camera to follow a car or a locomotive. And so here we are just spinning around the locomotive, which can give you, if you're trying to do a video grab of a train passing, sometimes that's a pretty handy effect to have. We can see there that there's proof that the world is flat instead of round, as was previously envisioned. You guys ready to drive? Let's get moving. This is the simple throttle we're using here. There's another couple of throttles that are more advanced. You can even get a mode that lets you click on the controls in the cab and drive that way. We got a grade crossing coming up here, so we'll have to do something about that a little bit. Oh, there's the grade crossing bells. I guess I hooked the grade crossing up correctly this time. pickup truck stopped at the grade crossing, so it's working, huh? I thought maybe we'd drop a couple of the boxcars we've got at the warehouse, so we'll pull up here for a little way. You can see the 3D texture and the dirt texture here. How things seem to protrude up out of the ground. That's just a texture map. There's no real modeling there. So let's cut the 2 boxcars off of the rest of the train here. You can use if you hit Control D, that brings up an uncoupling feature, and then you click on the coupler you want to undo, get the uncoupling sound, and it'll pull forward. Now, if you hover your mouse over a turnout, it'll show you which direction the turnout is set for. You can see it's set for the main, so we just throw it here by clicking on it, and now we can back into the spur track. I thought it was cool. I didn't notice it right away, but the Jeep 9s tend to smoke a bit. You start up, they smoke. If you slow down, they smoke. Now this is a non-train relative view. If we switch so that we're just sitting on the ground watching the train come at us. That'll do. Okay, now we need to uncouple those cars, then go get the rest of our train again. Hover over the turnout and click, and set and click. Darn near forgot to throw the turnout before we backed over it. That yellow circle that showed up over the turnout directions is the lock symbol. If you're too close to a turnout, the game won't let you throw it. Off we go. Farm and a bunch of those bushes that we planted, remember the spline bushes? Again, that field is 3-dimensional. If you see if I can adjust it so you can see it. It's pretty hard to see it. Oh, there's our lake. There, you get a great view of the weed splines and the 3D ground texture. We'll do a little run by here. Wait a minute. Big hole it. Emergency, emergency. Oops. And we get the accordion train effect here. So that's all for now. So, have a good one and see you later maybe.